Mic check. All right, good morning, everybody. Make yourself comfortable so we can start in a few moments. Thank you. Fantastic, and as the music fades out, that was very quick. I needed a little longer. Good morning, everyone, and thanks again for being here at the second day of the 10th edition of the Eurocities Integrating Cities Conference, kindly hosted by the City of Utrecht. What is your opinion of the festivities of yesterday? Guessed so. I also welcome our audience online. If you're joining us for the first time today, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Ali El-Jabri. I'm a professional moderator and studio presenter with Pro Moderation. It's a great pleasure to be with you. The program of the day is very simple. We kick off with a panel, then we break up for parallel trainings by the Connection Project champions, and I'll tell you about that later on. And then following lunch, we have site visits here in the wonderful city of Utrecht. Sophie Lang is joining us remotely again. She is the illustrator. She'll be making very nice drawings of our discussions today. Please reshare them on hashtag IntCities2022. That is hashtag IntCities2022. High time for the second high-level panel of this edition of the Integrating Cities Conference. And this one will focus on the gender dimension of integration policies, how to include and identify migrant women's needs when looking at migrant integration. We'd like to kick this one off with a short video. The video is produced by the Connection Project team. As you probably know by now, the Connection Project made 4 how-to guides on 4 areas of integration policy, including the integration of migrant women. Very welcome to you. Give them an applause for joining us. A very quick note on the definition of women in that particular part of the Connection Project. What is meant with women here is cisgendered heterosexual women, which is of course not to say that LGBT rights and themes are not important. They are highly relevant, but in this project the focus was different. And as you know, yesterday we of course had a wonderful workshop on LGBT issues in migration. It was a fantastic workshop. Make sure you look up the video. No, there's no videos, but there's probably some slides. Am I right? Yeah, make sure you look those up. Is your finger on the play button? Go for it.
A person's experience of integration will be greatly determined by their gender. Have you ever noticed that predominantly men attend the integration and language courses in your city? Or that employment is much lower among your female migrant communities, in comparison with their male counterparts? Although over half of Europe's migrant population is female, integration policies are overwhelmingly designed for male migrants, resulting in the gender-specific issues of migrant women being overlooked. This could be a lack of time to attend language and integration courses due to childcare and other family responsibilities, or that women are more likely to face gender discrimination and racism in their new country. A failure to recognise and address these issues can be detrimental to the integration process of migrant women. There are 4 things you can already do to improve the gender dimension of your city's integration policies. Number 1, make migrant services truly accessible to women. Involve trained and culturally aware integration staff alongside independent, preferably female interpreters. Create a safe space for women to speak freely without fear, with dedicated support services focused on maternal health and domestic violence. Number 2, migrant women know best when it comes to the issues they face during integration. Involving them in the design and delivery of integration activities will not only make services more effective, but will also help to build their trust. Number 3, try to work with family life rather than against it. Providing services such as language classes during school hours or with the offer of free childcare will greatly increase the chance of participation. And number 4, utilise intermediaries in building trust of institutions that offer integration support. When engaging with migrant women, enlist the help of individuals such as school teachers or other trusted figures in their community to vouch for your integration services. Want to know more? Check out the full Connection project guide featuring Europe-wide best practices and other useful materials over at integratingcities.eu.
I also encourage you to visit the Connection Project booth right outside the room. There's a QR code there. If you scan it, you'll also get access to the very interesting how-to guides, including the one on women integration. Could I please ask the esteemed members of our panel to come forward and take their seats? Allow me to introduce to you them in no particular order, simply starting from my right. We have Signe Grūbe, who is political advisor to the mayor on municipal and social issues in Riga. Next to her sits Anila Noor. She represents and is managing director of New Women Connectors. Next to her sits Madam Asher Craig, Deputy Mayor for Children's Services, Education and Equalities in Bristol. And I'm very happy we're also being joined by a genuinely feminist man, which makes us two, Thomas. Thomas Fabian is Deputy Mayor in Leipzig. Very warm welcome. And last but certainly not least is Halleh Ghorashi, Professor of Diversity and Integration at the Vrije Universiteit of Amsterdam. Maybe one more applause. I think you know the drill by now, and that is I open with a few questions and there'll be quick responses from the members of the panel. Then we open the floor for what we hope will be your active participation and input. My first question I would like to direct at Ms. Craig. Could you sketch for us the approach that you use in Bristol to supporting and helping migrant women to integrate in your society?
Of course. And,
if I may ask, could you please use the microphone over there? It is on if I'm not mistaken.
Hi, can you hear me?
Brilliant.
Okay. Yes, good morning, everyone, and thank you for inviting me. What was really interesting is the video that we were just watching. I thought, tick, 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 tick. That's what we already do a lot of that in Bristol for our women. But I think I really wanted to start off by actually challenging what we mean by integration, because in Bristol we talk about everyday integration. We actually did a project around everyday integration, but what we really mean is inclusion. Because I think, we stigmatise communities, particularly in the United Kingdom. We stigmatise by communities by having this top-down approach to what we mean by integration. Communities must assimilate, or they must become us. What a boring city Bristol and our cities would be if everybody was like us. So we do everything from a bottom-up approach. And again, it was really good to see, again, a reflection of what we do in Bristol. women are engaged and then involved, a lot of co-production, a lot of collaboration. We have Refugee Women in Bristol organisation that is there that provides a lot of the support services that are there. And we're just really mindful of, in developing kind of key policies, that we are thinking of women all the time. We have a women's commission in the city, a mayoral commission on women's issues, because we recognise that in terms of gender, women's issues were not being addressed. And we've done even more work around specific refugee and migrant women also. So, yeah, a number of programmes and projects, training programs that we've also developed. Horama, a Somali women's program. We were delivering a leadership program, but we realized not one refugee woman or even a man was on our program. So we went out and spoke to those women to understand childcare, access, inequality, discrimination, even from within their own communities. And the result of the Horama Somali Women's Programme has been a huge success. Women have set up their own social enterprises. They're entering the employment market for the first time, volunteering in their communities. So, yeah, it's a really healthy relationship that we tried to develop with migrant women in our city.
Thanks a lot for sketching the scene in Bristol. I'd like to move to Ms. Grūbe from Riga. Can you tell us about your approach to migrant women integration? It's already on.
At first, I would like to thank you for invitation and for opportunity to show and to Riga experience in integration of refugees. Thank you for that, for this opportunity. But if we are speaking about asylum seekers and refugees policies and implementation of social inclusion as well, we always understand that there is many dimensions. And one dimension is national politics and national government. Another one is municipality level and the capacity of municipality administration to manage situation with refugees and asylum seekers. Third one is refugee profiles and their expectations also from the new place where they are coming. And fourth one is local community and local community acceptance and willingness to accept and to be part of integration processes. And if we are speaking about this first, then in situation in Riga and Latvia at the moment when the war started in Ukraine, then it was like reopened all the scars in all society in Latvia. And therefore it was some social phenomenon and some social big solidarity to help people, to help Ukrainians. And therefore this first reason to help and to be part of integration process of Latvian society and Riga society, it was no doubt. And it was, I think, a successful story for Latvia to integrate and to give shelter Ukrainian refugees. If we are speaking about this national legislation, then also in a situation in Latvia we have special law for Ukrainian refugees, which allowed some social benefits at the first moment, and from other side it's give opportunity to for all Ukrainians to get access to all municipal and state services equal to Latvian citizens. And it's also a very important point. Also, this special law allowed in the field of employment to get job without knowing Latvian language. And it's also very important if we are speaking about integration and social inclusion processes at the first point. And therefore, in Riga Municipality, for example, works many Ukrainians. They are working in education field, in social care, in hospitals, and they are working also in our Riga support center for Ukrainian refugees. And there are Ukrainian women who are working in the first line, and they are in info points. And Ukrainian women, together with Latvian, are the first people who welcome newcomers from Ukraine. And it is also very important that we involve Ukrainians as equal in this process of social inclusion. And we are trying to understand their needs at the first point and the first steps when they come to our country.
Just to help better understand the context in Riga, there's about 19,000 Ukrainian forcibly displaced people, and I think the majority is women.
Yes, at the moment, 40% of them are women and 35% are children. Therefore, 75% is women with children in Riga as Ukrainian refugees. Yeah.
And the point that you mentioned about they can access the labor market without speaking any Latvian, because other groups of migrants must speak Latvian first. Okay? And I think it's the common Russian language between the Latvians and the Ukrainians that can bridge the language gap. Am I right?
Yes, you're absolutely right. The common language that we are used in our everyday communication is Russian language. In Russian language, we used in our Riga support center for Ukrainians and in working places as well. Yeah, it's a Russian language. At the first, it was a little bit weird in support center to speak Russian. Yeah. But yeah, it's a reality. It's a working language and we use it.
Thank you very much so far for clarifying. And we'll, of course, return to that context in Riga. It's very interesting. I'd like to turn to Mr. Fabian. Please sketch for us your strategic approach to integrating women in your society, migrant women.
Well, good morning to you all, and thank you for the invitation. And before I start answering your question, I would like to say that when I got the invitation, I must say I was at the beginning a bit hesitant to accept the invitation because during my 16 years working as a deputy mayor, I experienced it's very often helpful that people speak for themselves, no matter what group it is. But then I was told that I'm in the minority on this panel, so I thought, okay, fine. And I was also asked just to report about what we do. So this, I think, is part of my competence. Yeah. Okay. When I think about your question and the integration of female migrants into our urban society in Leipzig, I would answer similar to my colleague from Bristol. I also think it's important to have a political perspective of inclusion and not integration, where it's not only that migrants have to adapt to the receiving society also has to adapt to a new situation. And you're right, it's more fun, yeah. If you learn a lot, regarding the situation of female migrants, there's a real complexity of the situations. I mean, this panel is about vulnerability of female migrants, but I very often perceive that there are specific competencies of migrant women, and migrant women seem to be more flexible very often in many cases. Yeah, they are also, I sometimes call them the engines of integration. Yeah, because they have, especially if they have children, they have immediate contacts to childcare units, to schools. They meet other parents. So especially women who have children have very often a better access to the urban society. On the other hand, of course, there are many vulnerable women, beginning with as the video said, the situation is in Leipzig the same, less integrated in the labor market, and also, since I'm also was responsible for a long time for the youth department, some of them also face domestic violence, and one of the, I think, basic things about disadvantages of female migrants is very often they don't have their own bank account, they don't have their own money, and I think not only being part of the labor market, but also to have your own money is, I think, a very, very important question. You asked us to give just a short answer, so I keep the rest of what I had to say for your next question. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fabian. I'd like to have a perspective from civil society. Anila, Noor, New Women Connectors. In 2 sentences, what does your organization do?
Yes, so we are women-led, refugee, migrant women-led organization, and we are advocating for systematic change in the policy debate.
How about you tell us about that?
Yes. So I will like to say, just imagine when you open your mobile and they want to update your mobile, or if you want to download some app, it says you have to accept the terms and condition. So this terms and condition, if you decline, you will not get the access. That's the same thing we are trying to say. Migration, integration, job, everything is set standards by the cities, by the policies, and we are trying to unpack this systematic barrier, this institutional barriers, so it can be inclusive, and we want to redefine the problems by migrant and refugee women.
Can you give us an example of 1 or 2 of the problems or the blind spots which create these barriers?
Ali, I mostly don't like to share my story, but I think this is a very important panel where we are. When I claimed political asylum in 2016, my first job by Zoetermeer, I hope no one is here for Zoetermeer, they sent me to work in a factory, regardless to have my 3 master's degrees, regardless of my experience as a gender expert in Pakistan. And I was so angry, and I said I don't want to stay in the social system. And same year, I was so proud. 6 months, I started working with City of Amsterdam. I see my colleague also here. So you can see how cities have their own presumption, their assumptions. When they see migrant, as soon as they say, okay, they don't want to work because of their children, because of their culture, or they give a very limited, low-profile jobs. That's happened to me and so many women, still happening today. I can't believe we are end of the 2022, and we are still talking about the barrier, I think, which we had in Pakistan. And my disappointment from the European cities is that it's okay if I have same problem in South Asia because of culture, society, religion, so many different perspectives. But when it's come to Europe, it has to be more than that. Unfortunately, in cities, integration policies are set by people who have no idea how these migrant women are facing triple barrier, because when they are in the home countries like developing countries, they have so much distance from the labor market. They have been very limited access to the opportunity, and no one asks these women, what do you want to do? It's just an assumption, you will get married, you will have children, and that's it. And this relies here, like they want us as a migrant woman to look after our children by ourselves, but also go to the Albertine to do our shopping by ourselves. So these are triple barriers which is happening, and that's what we are trying to advocate. We are creating infinity approach, where we are not only using bottom-up or top-up bottom approach, but making a mechanism, ecosystem, where migrant refugee being involved in the policy debate, and they define what they want and how. That's very important.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Anila, for that explanation. Halleh Ghorashi is a leading academic voice in integration and diversity in the Netherlands. I've been looking forward to having you in the panel. Could you share with us some insights on the issues that we've discussed from your academic research?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me for this panel and very insightful talks already. I have been doing research about refugee women for 22 years already. And what you see happening actually, it starts already with the image. What is the image we have of refugees and refugee women? And there you see there is a shift, actually, if you think about dominant discourses in Europe, from refugees at risk to refugees as a risk, especially when it comes to refugee men. But refugee women are still at risk. They are considered to be vulnerable, need protection, and that is positive in a way, because that gives the society a role to protect them. But it has also a negative side into it, and that my research has shown that when you see women only as people who are at risk, vulnerable, you don't see their competences, you don't see their possibilities, you don't see what they can offer. Because then, especially I have done research mostly in welfare state societies, so Northern Europe, you see that the society is actually very much inclined towards helping the weak groups. And when you are considered as a member of a weak group, the only thing happens is to help you, and there is a hierarchy of people who help and people who receive help. And when you are at the receiving end, you are not seen as people who can be on the sending end. That's why most of the organization and goodwill organization, you could say, who work with refugees do not include refugees as employees. They are sending, they are helping, but they don't see the competences. This image has in different trajectories, different effects. It starts, one of my colleagues, Professor Spijkerboer, has done research as a migration law professor on what happens when women apply for asylum, women who have been activists. Their stories is considered to be a bit strange, because if you say you have been active as a political activist in your country, and the image is you are actually vulnerable and mainly the woman of, or the wife of, it doesn't make sense. So in that, and he analyzed this narratives and transcripts, how this idea of activist changed to somebody doing something. So for your application, it makes a huge difference if people do see you as a political activist or not. Later, when it comes to possibilities to get jobs, when the image of women is that they are only caretakers and the wives of men, the focus of the policy, and that is often in the policy making, a very traditional gender role pattern present, even in societies that they think they have broken that, or they unsettled that gender pattern. But the policy about migrants is very traditional. So women are caretakers and men are the ones who go to work. So what you see happening in most of the research we have been doing, that women who have been highly educated come after their husbands arrived as a refugee or migrant. They come, but the policy doesn't see them. They're completely absent. So what happens to them? The men go, they have to learn the language, they go to find jobs, if the policy works, at least for men. And then the women have to stay home, take care of children, so they become depressed. With highly educated women become depressed because the only expectation of them is to stay home. And that is so paradoxical for countries that consider themselves to be progressive in terms of gender roles. One more thing which is also very important is imagine, and that is when we talk about imagination, is very important. Women who often are considered to be second sex in their own countries. When they come and, as a refugee or migrant to a new country, it is for them a new opening to start a new life, think about their own possibilities of growth and emancipation and achieve something. Can you imagine that kind of idea of imagination of achieving something with a new birth in a new country, how that smashes when people just see you again as a second sex. So we really have to be very aware, and policymakers, of how to see the competences and talent of women. If I may give one more example, that is maybe two. One is about one of the activists I did research about. I did research about life stories of Iranian women who were active in Iranian Revolution of 1979, and when one of them she was sharing with me, I was fighting. Generations of women in my family were fighting for justice and equality in Iran. And when I came to the Netherlands and I was put in the asylum seeker center, and they told me, wait for 3 years till your asylum application is done, approved or not, I felt, is this the democracy I was fighting for in Iran? I am put in a kind of isolation, and I had to wait, and I became depressed. So women who were activists were considered and approached as passive victims who need help. They were not allowed to do anything, and that creates a lot of frustration and depression. You lose a lot of capacities by doing so. And the last example is my own example, since Anila shared her story. When I came as an asylum seeker to the Netherlands 30 years ago, and I had the ambition, and I was an activist in Iran, so I had the ambition to study and become part of the society, learn the language, go to the university. First approach of when I called and I wanted to have a class, Dutch class at the level of university, the person on the other side of the line said, but that kind of classes of the university are not for refugees.
Which year is this?
It is 1988. Even at that time, still we had the idea of, we are a multicultural society. So they said, it is not for you, because actually what she was saying, the refugees are not smart enough to follow the university of a language course. I did it, and I was the best of my class at the end, and I could enter the university, and I became a professor at this country. But I never dared in the beginning to say that my dream is to become a professor, because the reaction would be, you have to go and work in the factories, because that is good for refugees. Becoming a professor? Are you kidding me? And that is the image, the problem of image that actually kills the motivation at the start. So we have to really work on that.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ghorashi. Can we try to keep my mic on at all times, sound guys? Thanks. Very impressive, also personal stories that you're sharing. Thanks a lot for that. Returning to Ms. Grūbe, I think there's a very interesting good practice with regards to integrating Ukrainian refugee women into your labor market. Can you tell us about that?
Of course. We have in Riga and Latvia very good practice to integrating in the labor market, and it is job fairs. It's job fairs that we are happening in everyday basis in our Riga support center for refugees. And it is a very good example to how to find appropriate job. And in those job fairs, women find very high specialties jobs as doctors in hospitals, as scientists in some laboratories. And this is very good examples that we try to get this place where to work and Ukraine refugee together in one place. And this face-to-face meeting with potential employee is very successful. And I recommend all other cities to use this face-to-face job fairs and to use it in your everyday social inclusion policies, because it's work. I don't know why it's work for Ukrainians so much, but we understand that there is some social networking, but then when you are at a safety place, maybe that you know that this employee will be the good and safe, that is chosen by refugee center at the moment. Maybe also this is the point as well. It's not something something different or something unknown person. Yeah.
Maybe it breaks some of those imagery barriers that Ms. Ghorashi and Noor also, Anila Noor was talking about, when you meet people face to face. And just one last thing, I think, could you share with us some numbers as to how many women you've helped to employment? And how many employers you've helped with a very good employee?
At the moment, we have 3,000 vacancies, and from these 3,000 vacancies, it's 1/3 is successful stories with good examples.
So 1,000.
1,000 at the moment.
Brilliant, thanks a lot. By the way, if you have questions, prepare them, and we'll be with you in a moment. Comments are welcome, and I'm sure there must be some on your mind. Can I move to Ms. Craig from Bristol? You've been listening to Ms. Ghorashi, as well as Anila Noor, about changing the narrative, how the narrative can sometimes be a barrier, with very, very clear examples. You yourself actually started talking about that very narrative by saying the word integration might have to be replaced. It seems we're on one line. Still, we're not there. So what are the barriers that you experience as a policymaker in order to make the changes that you yourself would like to see?
Again, I suppose it is the mindset of the majority community. You know, I'm a black woman, I'm a leader. My parents are migrants. They're part of the Windrush generation. So I get it. So I don't come from I don't come from a perspective that I see all migrants or migrant women as you know, othering them or less than. You know, I see women for who they are. I ask those questions. I don't make the assumptions. I mean, at Bristol City Council, where we work, we have a lot of migrant women who are cleaners. I have conversations with those women. Some of those women are scientists, engineers. They still haven't got their papers after many, many years in the organisation. So it's breaking down and changing the mindset. And I think one of the projects that we've done over the last 3 years is, again, looking at everyday integration. And it wasn't just having the conversation with migrant women or migrant communities directly. It was all communities, including people in local neighbourhoods, because you have to change the mindset. The media does not help in the narrative that it is pushing out on a day-to-day basis. Yes, there are very vulnerable women, and the point that you were making about how women are perceived to be less than. I'm constantly, even I've argued over the last couple of years where men are always the ones who are pushing for, we want to have a meeting with the mayor, we're unhappy about X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, why are you sitting in a room just full of men? Where is the voice of women? So for me, it really is important that they are part of the narrative. And as I said before, tackling inequality is the golden thread through everything that we do in Bristol City Council. I don't apologise for it. The mayor doesn't apologise for it. And that means, you know, being inclusive. So their stories, their needs count. So I was thinking about, I constantly overstep the mark as a politician. So I was always told that, you know, Asha, as a politician, there is a red line and you cannot step over it. I constantly step over that red line. I need to step over the red line in order for us to get to deliver for our citizens. So I actually chair the operational group of officers. We have nearly 50 officers, both internal to the organisation and external, because I was frustrated that we were tackling the needs of refugee women and migrants across the city, but in isolation, housing over there, education over there, the voluntary and faith communities over here. And I said, no, we need to have one inclusion policy. We've developed the policy. We have a clear action plan. Everyone is clear about who does what, where, and how for our communities. And it works. And I chair that group. I need to pass the chair on, but I feel confident now that the organisation and the city has actually got it. We have to work, we have a policy of working as one city. You know, the challenges we face are not the challenge for the local authority alone. It's for all the key players in the city. So that's how we kind of progress. So, yeah, women need to be at the table. It's as simple as that.
It's as simple as that sometimes, indeed. Are there questions at this point and comments in the room? Show me your hand if you do. Okay, there's at least one. Brilliant. I'll get to you in a second. After this question to Thomas, Fabian, Mr. Fabian, one of the recommendations from the Connection Project is that you might need safe spaces for women. If I'm not mistaken, you have a women-only training center, which is also very helpful in creating opportunities. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, but before I tell you about this, I think on this panel we all agree, it seems to be that the narrative about migrants has to be changed, and that they should be active also politically in our society. And I'm very happy that in Leipzig we have a very active migrants council with a lot of activists now, and I also worked for it that they are elected and not chosen by the local government, and I'm also happy that it was possible now that the council decided that the city will provide financial means for having a house for migrant self-organizations, and also they will develop the concept themselves, not us. And there were discussions in the city council like, hey, Mr. Fabian, do you want to establish parallel societies? We want the migrants to be integrated. And I said, no, well, we want them to be integrated, but we need them to articulate their own perspective. And as I said yesterday in one of the workshops, that there's what the sociologists say, this integration paradox. The better migrants are integrated, the more political debates we have and also conflicts. But this is good for a democracy. Yeah. Now, coming back to your question, yes, or maybe to provoke a discussion in this panel, yeah, I think, well, I'm in a double role. Yeah, I'm a head of a big administration responsible for the reception of refugees, providing accommodation, having residential places, and also for the so-called integration of migrants. So, from the political perspective, I agree with everything that was said so far, but on the other hand, we also have to provide services. This is an important task of the city, city administrations, and in this context, yes, we have a specific residential house for single mothers, especially, and we have courses, language courses, and we have a very good cooperation with the local economy so that they can get very quickly into the labor market. Yeah. And of course, we also need safe spaces. Earlier on, you said, well, this is now about women, and we're not talking about LGBTIQ people, but we also have a safe space for them. Because, and I would like to mention this, they very often face double discrimination, yeah? And, well, you're all nodding, so I don't have to explain it, yeah? Okay, so that was my answer, thank you.
Thank you very much. In the interest of time, I'd like to move to the room and then return. Just to clarify, so my note was on how the Connection Project was defined, but of course in this panel, I will not be the one to exclude LGBTQ issues from the discussion. What's your name and what's your question?
Hi everyone. Thank you, and thank you for the very inspiring discussion and examples of everything you do. My name is Elizabeth, and I work at the International Organization for Migration, and I'm based in Brussels. I had a very specific question actually for Riga, for Mrs. Grūbe, because you were talking about the Ukrainian refugees that work in the health sector, and some of them as doctors as well. And what I see in our work is that we work with very highly skilled migrants and refugees that have knowledge, that have worked in the health sector before, as nurses, for example, or doctors. But it's impossible for them, or very, very challenging to actually access these jobs because they're protected. And so I was a bit surprised that you said that you could actually put these people at work in the health sector, and I would be interested to see if there was anything that you needed to do at political level to get this done, because for us that would be very interesting in the work that we do with migrants and refugees that have those skills. And especially because it's, of course, an area where there's huge needs on the labor market as well. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Elizabeth. Ms. Grūbe.
As I said before, we have this special law according to the Ukrainian citizens. And in this law, it's allowed to recognize and to employ doctors and nurses in hospitals. And therefore, this is possible, but unfortunately, at the moment, this is possible only for Ukrainian refugees. It's not for other asylum seekers who came to Latvia. Of course, if we are looking for this, looking in hospitals, it's also have some time for document recognition of document and education. Of course, it takes some time, but it's possible and it's happening. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Any more questions and comments in the room? Brilliant. Thanks, Anila.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you. I found your insight very enlightening. I'm Michelle Voy from PICUM, and I wanted to come back to something that Halleh was talking about in terms of the fact that we all see this juxtaposition or this clash. The societies, and I think it builds on what Anila was saying, like you came to Europe and you expected something better. And I just find it interesting, like on the one hand, yes, gender has advanced quite a lot in Europe. I can say that because I'm from the United States. We've just basically, I mean, I live in Europe. I've also lived for about 30 years in Belgium, but in the United States, you can compare Europe and the United States in terms of gender, and the United States is much lower, even just on sexual reproductive health rights, just as a recent example. But I just think it's interesting because on the one hand, you have this clash. So this region is advanced in general on gender, and yet it's not in migration policy. And on that note, even on migration policy, it's not for undocumented women. I always found it interesting. I don't know if it's Save the Children or some big NGO does an annual report, which countries of the world are the best to be a woman in. And usually Scandinavia ranks pretty high. I think we all know that. But for undocumented women to get access to healthcare in Scandinavia, it's extremely difficult. So I'm just wondering if any of you could, I mean, I think you've all given your insights, but what can we do more on migration policy to remove this gender bias? And also the status bias. So not just for migrant women in general, but also for undocumented.
Ms. Ghorashi, would you like to respond, perhaps? It's on its way.
Thank you. Yeah, very good question, actually. I wouldn't know where would be the best place to be as a woman or as a, I was not binary, actually, individual. That is also even further, as you mentioned, because that is even more kind of exclusionary when you are not identifying yourself with man or woman. But what we have been doing in reaction to what already was said, maybe interesting to share with you, that we have been doing a lot of research about narratives of women, but we realized at some point, or refugees and refugee women, that we realized that actually collecting narratives maybe helps to understand better what the people feel and what they need. But in order to make change and change the mindset, but also change the competences of policymakers or societal active people, we need to have connections, to make connections between the perspectives of refugees and their narratives and perspectives of policymakers and societal initiatives. So we started with this infrastructure which called Refugee Academy. And we try to bring different kind of knowledge and perspective together, so co-create inclusion through multiplicity of perspectives. And it seems very important to really if you really want to go beyond meeting is important, but we know also from contact theory that only meeting without conditions of inclusion perspectives can also strengthen the stereotypes. So you need to have safe spaces or safer spaces, as LGBTQ plus refugees use the term safer because it brings differentiation into the safe space. We need to have spaces in which people from different perspectives can come together and to create a kind of polyfocality of perspectives to think about inclusion. What does inclusion mean from personal perspective? What does inclusion mean from professional perspective? What does it mean from academic perspective? And that is something really co-creative spaces that is needed to change the policy, make the policy making inclusive. And also, one more thing is that what I saw in the Netherlands happening after what we call asylum crisis, or maybe governmental crisis is a better term for it, in 2015, is that a lot of societal actors became involved in the cities. And they really, and we have been, Plan Einstein is one of the examples of Utrecht. There are a lot of active citizens that they say, we want to contribute to transformation of the lives of people in better way to come here. And that kind of collaborations are so important and be reflective about also the mindset. So creating spaces within space, what we call in-between spaces, in which you really share stories and perspectives and create reflection or kind of mirroring about your own mindsets and blind spots, and from there try to find connections and transforming policies that are more aligned with the lives of people you make policy about. So this is the way I think from academia we know that this is actually the next step necessary, not to make policy for, but policy with people, and from there to really invest in strengthening competences of policymakers, refugee advocates, all involved, and academics as well.
Brilliant. In the interest of time, I'll head to the room first and then come back to you. And I'm sure you'll find a way to weave in your answer. Okay, there's a question there or a comment. It's right there. Thanks a lot, Alexandra, for the help.
Hello, Theodora Manolakos from the City of Vienna. I have a comment. I would, to answer or also to comment your question, I think 2 points to get the gender dimension in integration policies is the data, evidence-based data, not only gender aggregated, what is already should be, but also to have the really gender analysis of the data we have. I mean, we are all from cities. We have registers, administration data, so we are full of data in the cities, but we don't really use it, or we don't see the evidence, which is evident. Yeah, what is evident? And the second thing is the budget, the gender budget. I think if we really want to change something, the gender dimension should be everywhere in the budget. Yeah, but those who decide over the budget mostly are male, white male. Yeah.
Thanks a lot for the comment. Anila, a response from you, and in the interest of having more time for interaction, I kindly ask all speakers to try and keep it concise.
Yes, I hope so. This is my life to talk about it. It's difficult. But I think I will like to say it's so complicated than we can imagine, because whatever we discuss is not new for so many people. It's not new. We are not the one who is discussing. We want to change the narrative, but how? We want to create a more inclusive city, but how? I will say, as my perspective, my engagement on a global level, even I was in COP27 like yesterday, and I saw there white men from the World Bank, from everywhere, and they are white men and talking about gender. So this is the problem, actually. We really need to stand together and saying, stop. This is a time, as a woman-led organization to work with them, not as a beneficiary, not as a second thought, but give them more spaces to create visibility, to bring the intersectional lens, and not to think about we are giving some favor to women. It's about favor to our generation, to this world. Why we think women's right or women's problem or gender problem is only for women? It's for all of us. It's about what's happening. We really need to understand the racism, the discrimination, embedded in how they describe who is defining what is gender, who is defining what is women's right. This is very problematic. And it's not only for my sake, it's not only for Halleh or for her, it's for everyone. This is the time we really need to think how we can work to say no to using even terms, vulnerabilities. We really need to create our new role models as a resilient woman. I always say what I learned in Pakistan is giving me still disappointment from the Netherlands especially, like why Netherlands still today, because I don't speak Dutch, still today they have hesitance to accept me as a good Dutch. So I don't want to get emotional, but I am.
That's all right. Thanks a lot, Anila.
Can I just quickly add as well, I think what we did in Bristol, and I think we did it pre-COVID, I can't remember, you lose time, but we created a new narrative and we have produced a series of videos called We Are Bristol, to break that narrative that people have about difference and to, really demonstrate we are all different, regardless of whether we're refugee, women, migrants, the police officer in the street. We asked a series of questions, and you realize from the videos that actually we have to embrace a difference, including migrant and refugee women. And I think, again, I was talking about how tackling inequality is a golden thread through the work that we do, but also the bedrock for a lot of our policies are the SDG goals. We're also signed up to the Global Compact for Migration, and we walk our talk. I think for our administration, it really is important. But it's interesting that when you sit in a room, most of the people who are leading on the front line of this are women. Actually, are either migrant women or women in general. But when it comes to the decision making and the policy making at government level, you're absolutely right. No disrespect, but pale, stale, older males most of the time. So the reality is, you're gonna get policies that are stuck in an ancient mindset that doesn't relate to reality. So, yeah, roll on a new government for us. But anyway, that's
Thanks a lot for that comment as well.
Sorry, I didn't want to disrespect any men, but it is the reality. Come on, it is our reality.
Any more questions?
There'll be complaints now. Okay.
That is brave, Thomas. Go for it.
Well, I'm going to retire in 4 weeks. And the next deputy mayor in Leipzig will be a woman.
All right.
Well, she has already been elected.
Thank you. I wanted to ask a question about employment. We heard a really powerful example of underemployment and the loss of potential that comes from that. And I just wondered if the panel could talk a little bit about what practically can be done from the policymaker side, so about removing barriers in terms of training and all of that sort of thing. But also I'm really struck by the employer side of things and actually what's needed on that side around flexible working, around particularly in countries at the moment that do have really tight labour markets, and actually there's a real need, yet we seem to be kind of missing out on this huge potential, and I just wonder how that conversation could happen better. Yeah. Thanks.
So the conversation, but also what practical things can be done in terms of policy making. Who wishes to respond? Go for it, of course.
Maybe just a short reflection, and that is, if you think about the image is very important in the way that organizations approach employees. And what in the research we have been doing in the last couple of years, you see that deficit approach, which is very prominent in organizations when they talk about diversity and inclusion. So it's about deficit of the people that need to be helped to enter the organization and help them to become part of the organization. And that is really a kind of approach which does not see the competences and the qualities, but it really fixates on othering and shortcomings. And this really is not helpful, because even organizations say we want to be inclusive, we want to include diversity, at the end bring people in and reify their difference and their shortcomings and do not really invest in their development. At the end, they don't get a diverse organization because people leave at the end. You know, when you are, and there is also a catch-22. People, when they come in, they say, you know, we invest in you to become the same, to become like a norm employee, but at the same time, they are always approached as others. So they never become the same. They remain other while they do all the best. Maybe they become the norm employee. So these are all these paradoxes that organizations are dealing with and organizing. And if you don't change the mindset and do not develop structural and cultural inclusive measures, you will not be able to have a long-term employing diverse groups in organizations, especially the ones who are considered to be to have shortcomings that need help. Again, the refugee lens is very strong in organizations. And one last thing, we need white men in position of power to really also become our allies in transformations, because that is very important. No, but because I think otherwise we are actually asking the people who are diverse to do all the things. While people in position of power who are white men and privileged, they have maybe more possibilities also to take risks, to bring in new ideas and be innovative in changing organizations and policy making. But then in that, they really have to have this diverse perspective, inclusive perspective, and really do it together with people who are not white, so have coalitions in the process of change. That's the last.
You may have to delay your pension, Mr. Fabian.
Oh, no.
I promise the floor.
Thank you for that comment. I wanted to add that one of my justifications for not retiring earlier than reaching the age of 67 is that I learned a lot from many different people, and I also learned something from my daughter. She wrote a thesis about privilege awareness, and actually was at the beginning intellectually challenging, yeah, because that's so one of the things is that people who try to become aware about their privileges should open doors, support self-organizations. This is what I have tried to do, not only with migrants, also, for example, I believe in it's a new concept we have in Leipzig, the self-organization of homeless people who live in the streets, yeah, and not only provide services, which is very important, we have street workers, residential places and everything, but also help them to give them a voice. Yeah, so this in every area. Yeah, I tried to be an ally. Thank you.
Anila, very brief, and then I'll check one more time if there's a question or comment in the room. I think I see one. Is there more? Niels? There's 1, 2. You, sir? Okay, then I suggest these will be the last comments, and then we wrap up quickly after that. Anila, do you mind waiting a second? We have those first. Thanks a lot for your collaboration. Yes, go ahead.
Hello. Yeah. Hello, my name is Nathan. I'm representing the local spiritual assembly of the Baha'is of Utrecht. And actually I had a question for the panel. We've mainly been talking about the group of refugees, the policymakers, a little bit about employers. But I was wondering what your opinion is about the responsibilities and opportunities of everyday individuals to contribute to these changes. So other than policymakers, the group of refugees, and maybe the employers, what are the responsibilities and opportunities for us, everyday individuals, to contribute to these changes?
It's a beautiful concluding question. Thanks a lot. Niels from Amsterdam.
Yes, thank you, Ali. I don't have to introduce myself anymore. I got a question to the whole panel with regards to the importance of role models. If you're like a migrant refugee woman, you come to a new place. I think it's up to the local administrations not to, as Professor Ghorashi said, smash the image of what you can do. But sometimes also people come here who don't even have an image yet because they were not used to it in their home country maybe, and they have more opportunities here. And how the role of someone in a similar situation who also has been a refugee and has found a work, found a job, and create a network opportunities. How do you see the importance of that? To really include them, of course, in policy making as well, but also include them in activities, show what can be done, that they really have someone like, oh, I can do this as well, maybe.
What I suggest is that I give each speaker 1 minute, if that's all right. And then you're free to take on one of the questions in your response. Shall we start with you, Ms. Grūbe? Is that all right? And then we move to the other end. Yeah.
I will try to answer to the question very shortly with a statement. I think that the main essence is to stay human, stay a human being in every position that we are in, as refugees, as policy makers, as women, as men, as LGBT, as simply be human. And when you are a human being, then you could communicate and to see your opponent or so other people also as human beings. And it's a main essence, I think, to all problems.
Thank you very much for those beautiful concluding words. Anila, briefly.
Thank you. 1 minute, very tough. I think what we can do as an individual and as an organization or where we are, we really need to reflect internally as well. Our understanding of how we are working towards, especially when it's come to labor market, there are so much been there, but it's very, very low profile jobs are given there. Why? When we ask for migrant and refugee women, why always we think they can be a chef, they can be a take care, but why we can't give the opportunity to become a judge, to become a lawyer, to become a professor? So we really need to reflect and to evaluate how we can do and how we can understand where we are and what we want to do. It's very important to create co-partnership, to bring meaningful participation, what we as a New Women Connected is advocating, and how we can create more tools and acceptance instead of beneficiary or vulnerable group, how we can take women-led, refugee women-led organization as a partner. That's our key, that's very important. And that will create more role models to visibility.
I would actually say we already have many of those role models, starting from when my parents came in the 1950s. We have many migrants who are doctors, professors, engineers, heading up key organisations. We have 3 migrant councillors in Bristol City Council, kind of voted and elected. And so there are role models right in our faces. We fail to somehow see them. So migration isn't a now issue. Migration has been happening, the patterns of migration, for years. So we have migrants sitting in amongst us, as I said, as doctors. So we just need to be cognizant of that fact. Yeah, I would just say, you're right, co-production, collaboration, work with our communities, but not just with the migrant communities. It's working with all of our citizens, and that's why it's important to change the narrative and the mindset. And I will say that COVID, the last 2.5 years, I think because many of us were really still, and all of what the world events that were happening around us, I can tell you for now, there were a lot of people in my own organisation who slowly have started to become allies. They're checking themselves and their own prejudices and coming to a realization that actually, you know, we need to change in order for the world to embrace difference. So, yeah.
Maybe two things. First of all, I really agree with you that it's important to cooperate and make co-production, and I think it's also very important not only to meet but also to have commitments and results and put them into practice. And the other thing is that I think integration or inclusion will never ever be a state that we reach. It will be a continuous process, and it has to be trained every single day, like democracy. Yeah, democracy is also every single day, like sportsmen and musicians have to train every single day. We in politics have to train also every single day.
Yeah. Very important points already mentioned about role models. I have some difficulty with the role model concept, because then we reify people in certain boxes, and then we just showcase them, but do not take their perspectives that seriously. So, if we are talking about role models, I would broaden that and think about white men who have been role models of transformation in organizations. Women, like me, for example, when I was appointed a special professor in 2005, I was one of the 5 non-white women in academia as a full professor, which is still the case in the Netherlands after 20 years. So it is actually a problem that when you showcase, you become a role model, but then again, nothing changes in the organization. What do you have? You know, it is important for students to see somebody like me with a Dutch accent in Dutch teaching them. It's good for them to become more aware of differentiations, possibilities, diversity. But then if you don't change the structures to have more diversity and inclusion, then it doesn't work. So I would say role models are good, but we have to go beyond it, and then also everybody, all individuals, have a responsibility in these transformations. That's why I talked about the initiatives from the cities, the engaged citizens that take initiatives to really create home for undocumented migrants, for example, who need safe spaces and safer spaces also in the city. So we have our own responsibilities, but I also see that policymakers sometimes make it very difficult for individuals to take responsibility because they create their own paradoxes in societies. When you position an asylum seeker center with 1,000 people in a village of 5,000 people, so you create actually people who become against it. They go against it and they don't accept that because they say these changes are dynamic. So you in a way, but sometimes with policies that are not inclusive, you create or take away responsibility, or I would say, in positive sense, from the citizens, and create its own, unrest, and so we need to have to bring all these elements together to create inclusive policies that enables collaboration with engaged citizens, see their value, and also broaden our idea of role models, that we become co-owner of transformations in society and organizations.
Thank you very much. Before I thank our fantastic panel, and before you start packing your bag and running for coffee while checking your email and talking to your daughter, allow me to make a few remarks. It'll just be 1.5 minutes. At 11 o'clock, right after the coffee break, you'll have trainings by the Connection Project champions. As you know, the Connection Project had 8 partners. These were trained to be integration champions who can offer training in the 4 integration policy areas that were explored by the Connection Project. The trainings are a condensed version of the 4 how-to guides that were produced by the Connection Project. And as said, we strongly encourage that you read those how-to guides. You can scan the QR code at the booth of the Connection Project. Right in the hall. At 12:30 we have lunch, and at 1:30 we'll have our site visits. You'll be picked up by the bus at 1:30 exactly. So try to be on time. The bus will return at 4 o'clock. allow me to thank a few important people that made this fantastic event possible. First of all, of course, Eurocities for all the great efforts that they made, as well as the City of Utrecht for being such a wonderful host, all the speakers, all the moderators, the technicians, the good people of the venue, Sophie, the illustrator, and I encourage you to reshare her illustrations if you can. And of course, I thank all of you, the participants, for your fantastic input, wishing you the best of luck in your important work. Now, please join me in thanking our fantastic panel. It was a privilege to be a moderator here, and a privilege generally to be a moderator in this Integrating Cities edition. Halleh, Ghorashi, Thomas Fabian, Asher Craig, Anila, Noor, and Signe, Grūbe. Give them a big hand, and see you later. Thank you so much.